If you have one of these and it's getting a bit tired, or you're not very happy with the performance of it, you might want to modify it a little bit to make it a bit better. This is a short video to show you what I've done. I've converted it from this to that, which has some nice Sanwa buttons on it, and a new spring in the joystick, which makes it a bit more responsive. I bought these ages ago now when the Neo Geo X had been released and received pretty bad reviews, so I got it quite cheap, along with the Mega Pack and the second stick, all for under £200 I think at the time. You can get these on AliExpress and eBay and stuff, about 30 quid-ish. I wouldn't necessarily recommend them, but they do look cool, and with a few relatively inexpensive parts you can make it a better stick if you want, or if you've got one already and it's starting to wear out a little bit, this might be useful for you. So I'm going to take these apart and show you the difference now inside them. It does involve some soldering and a bit of hot glue, but nothing too complicated. I mean, I'm no whiz or anything with electronics, and I've managed to do it all right. Okay. To open up your arcade stick, you need to peel off the rubber feet. There's one in each corner, and there's 5 screws there you need to remove, and then the entire back piece comes off, and this is what it will look like underneath. It's quite simple really. Joystick, a little board for the buttons, and then a little board for the start select as well. This is what my modified stick looks like, and as you can see I've removed quite a few of the stock parts and replaced the board with a USB encoder, which I got off eBay, or actually it might be from a Raspberry Pi supply site, I can't remember now. Those particular buttons I've got on there fit nicely in the case without needing to bend anything. And I've made some changes to the start and select buttons as well, and the joystick buttons. So underneath the joystick plate there's just 4 micro switches wired up in a particular way, which I've unwired and then rewired to go into the USB encoder there. These are the parts that I've taken out. So this one, which is the stock buttons, you just undo these 4 screws, and the whole thing lifts off. You unplug the joystick there, the joystick wiring unplugs there, and the start and select buttons unplug there. So that's that bit, and then I just remove that, the whole thing will leave and everything. This is the start and select board. As you can see, the buttons on here are just soldered to the board there and there. I just heated them up with a soldering iron and used one of those little clicky sucker things to suck the solder off. Quite easy. And those are now, this is what you see underneath. Just some micro switches which I've wired up to go to the encoder board. And the joystick arm, joystick wiring, which is a common ground and then 4 wires, which I'm actually, what I should say is I'm using these joysticks on a Raspberry Pi thing that that's running Emulation Station. They don't actually work on the Neo Geo X once you've done this, because you take, this is their control board that the Neo Geo X is expecting to see, so once you take that out it just doesn't work. But I don't use the handheld anyway. I've converted my dock into a Raspberry Pi case that runs MAME and reasonably well. So yeah, this wiring underneath this plate, I just unsoldered all of the wiring there and just replaced it with different wires to go onto the encoder board. So on here I've got your A, B, C, D buttons. On this particular board, these come up on Emulation Station 0, 1, 2 and 3. I've got start and select wired in here. On the back of this board it particularly says start select there, but I think just put it wherever you want. And then these buttons on the joystick are going to, oops, these four here, which is up, down, left and right. I did try originally plugging this wiring, because that's the same port there. I did try plugging that directly into this USB encoder, but it would only detect an input when I pulled down, which was where the common ground was wired up to there. So I guess that was the only one that was making a connection when I pulled the joystick down. So this is now, you know, up, down, left and right. It says on the board A up, AD, AR and AL, and they're all working fine. I've tested this. Just had a round of metal slug, which was good on the Raspberry Pi. Now these buttons, I'll put the link in the description. They're screw-ins. They don't really fit very well against each other. They're very tight and they're very difficult to get in. And if I show you here, they don't fit flush into the casing, because obviously it's a moulded casing. They're expecting to be in something flat. But I watched a load of other videos about modding this before I started, and the snap-in type buttons don't fit flush either, and people have reported, or in some forums they reported that the snap-ins wouldn't stay snapped in. So that's kind of, you know, I don't know what you could do there. You could probably fill it in with something or whatever, but they're lovely and tight in there. I mean, they don't move around or anything, and they don't feel weird when you're playing or anything like that. So they're Sanwa ones. All the parts I got for this were from Arcade World UK, so I'll put links in. Inside here, the stock spring is very light, so I've replaced that with an AS56 spring, which I think is another Sanwa part. That makes the joystick much stiffer and much more responsive. Mine were kind of very worn out anyway. Like basically, if this unit, before I replaced the spring, if I just shook the unit, it would register presses because it was that loose. It's a bugger to get in. You have to push on this actuator, and then there's a little, zoom in a bit. You have to take this plate off, you have to take the switches out, and it kind of, it's an absolute pain to do, but can I focus it? Can't focus. Sorry, this is just on my phone, so it's a bit shit. That, you might have to look for another video if I can't get it in focus. But basically that sort of black housing you push down to depress the spring inside, and then holding it onto the shaft is a little clip you have to click out, which is awkward as hell to get out. And then once you put the new spring in, it is really awkward to get it back on. So yeah, have a look for some videos about just changing the spring in a joystick. It's the same sort of thing. I didn't find a specific Neo Geo X one before I did that. I just had a look and found one. It's awkward, and because like you can't get the joystick out of the housing, it's kind of something you have to do in your lap, pressing up on the joystick underneath and pushing down on the housing from above. So yeah, it's another shot of the wiring there if you need it. I've just secured that board with a little bit of hot glue. Tape all the wires down. There's the buttons. These, when I bought this board, it came with wiring with spade connectors on, but I found they didn't really push on properly, so I just thought I'd just solder it on. So they're soldered directly to the micro switches, and like I say, these buttons are short enough to not knock against the bottom of the case or anything. It all fits in there without bending anything. Okay, I think that's all I've got to say. Thanks for watching. If there's any interest, I'll do a little run through about what I've done to the dock as well, where I've fitted a Raspberry Pi and LED light and switches for the fan and safe shutdown and all that sort of stuff. Okay.